Welcome back to eCoreAcademy, everybody. My name is Ashley Maestrado. I may be a new face for some of you viewers, but I am a student life specialist here at eCoreAcademy. I, as well as a team of others, will be bringing you helpful content in regards to your extracurriculars and life outside of school with our eCore Beyond the Books and Meet the Champ series. For this interview, I worked with Anita to get in touch with a very prominent figure in the medical field. But before we get into this video, please make sure to like this video, hit the subscribe button and post notification bell, share using our socials, and drop a comment down below. With this interview, we hope to give viewers, specifically those looking into the medical field, insight into the overall educational process and career of medical doctors. We will ask Dr. Benton a series of questions regarding her decision-making and experiences throughout high school, college, medical school, fellowship, residency, and beyond. In doing so, we hope to give viewers a greater understanding about the requirements and commitments needed for this field, so they can decide whether or not to commit themselves to this path. Now, let me introduce you to Dr. Benton. Dr. Tammy D. Benton earned her BA in biology at Oberlin College before continuing on to medical school at the Ohio State University School of Medicine in Columbus, Ohio. She completed her residency and fellowship at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx, New York. She is certified in child and adolescent psychiatry, general psychiatry, pediatrics, and psychosomatic medicine. She is the clinical director of child and adolescent psychiatry at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She is also psychiatrist in chief, the executive director of the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, and the Frederick H. Allen Edward Chair in Child Psychiatry. She is also the Associate Professor of Psychiatry at the Perelman School of Medicine at UPenn. Good afternoon, Dr. Benton. We are honored to have you here on eCoreAcademy's platform, and we thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to speak with us. I just know all of our viewers will be very grateful for this interview.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to support the work that you're doing. I think it's really a wonderful thing, so I'm glad I could participate.
It's honestly, the pleasure is all of ours, honestly. But first of all, I believe it's very important to address one of the main topics of concern in our world at this point in time. Obviously, the coronavirus has brought turbulent times and new difficult situations for both doctors and all citizens alike. That being said, I believe this is exactly why we salute the services that you, your team, and your hospital are providing. So could you please share what it's like to be a frontliner, so to say, during COVID-19?
So it's been as you identified, it's been a really challenging time for all of us. It's unlike anything we've ever experienced before. This is the only pandemic in our lifetimes for most of us, even though, there have been other pandemics outside the United States. There really hasn't been anything in the US that's affected us like this for a really long time. And so I don't think we were prepared for it. And I think that imposed a certain level of stress. But the pandemic itself has been really difficult because there's been so many deaths. But the other components of it is the aspects of stress that the quarantine and the lockdowns have actually imposed on families. And so for many of us, there is the frontline aspect of this in that we're seeing patients every day. But the stress on families, is the same stress shared by the healthcare workers as well. So when schools close, their kids aren't going to school either. And so it's the act of balancing all of those things. But we are, I think, turning the corner, though, not immediately because, there are more deaths right now than there have been through most of the pandemic. We are starting to vaccinate people. We started just this week. So, there's an end in sight and we're all looking forward to that. So, thank you for asking. That is the pressing issue of the day. But together we're all getting through it, and I'm confident we'll emerge from this stronger and more united and better.
Absolutely. As you said, you guys are faced with many difficult situations that none of us have seen in our lifetime. So thank you again for your great services. The whole world appreciates all frontliners like yourself. However, obviously, this interview is meant to focus on you, your achievements, your career, and your education, because clearly you are a very impressive and you have a very impressive and inspiring background. It's amazing because for a lot of teenagers like myself, it's really a dream to come to some level of your achievement. But you were once, of course, our age, maybe not knowing exactly what we were going to do with our life. Could you please walk us through what it was like to be a teenager at the time? Did you know that you really wanted to go into medicine?
So I have to be honest with you. I wasn't sure at the time that I was a teenager that I wanted to go into medicine. So I thought about medicine, but I also thought about lots of other things. I actually thought about getting a PhD and doing more research. So both things crossed my mind. I think it wasn't until I was actually in college that I thought about being a physician. But when I was in high school, I did, like all of you, I was thinking about college in the future and what kinds of things I needed to do to prepare myself for college. And so I took the courses that I liked. I took the courses that I needed to be able to get myself into a competitive college. Um, at the time, back in my day when we were preparing to go to college, we didn't stress as much the competitive component of it as I think happens for people nowadays. I think teenagers applying to college now are under a lot of stress. I'm not sure it's all like necessary to get you to where you want to be. But I do think it's important that you expect the best of yourself, and that you put as much as you can into doing as well as you can. I suggest taking courses that you're interested in and finding other things to demonstrate your ability to have diverse interests, be flexible, interact with others. So, when I was in high school, I did a lot of different things. I was in the Spanish club and I played tennis and I played volleyball and I played basketball, although I was not a great basketball player. I wanted to participate. I ran track. I tried all those things, and then I found the things that I was good at, and I continued to work on those. And so I, was a competitive athlete. And I was a great student. I was not the top student in my class, and that was okay because I didn't want to be the top student in my class. I wanted to be a happy student in my high school and spend time with my friends and do productive things. And so I was able to do those things. And so I enjoyed my high school experience, and I really encourage people to do that. I think sometimes we think we have all the time in the world to immerse ourselves in the experiences, but of being in high school. But it really is a time for you to pursue and explore things that you really enjoy, try new skills and try new things, and then prepare yourself for college, which will be a new and interesting experience. But I suggest when you think about colleges for all high school students, you should think about some place that you're really going to be a good fit and you're going to enjoy yourself. And so I think those things are more important than thinking about the prestige of the college. So for me, I chose a liberal arts college. It happened to be a competitive college, but the focus was much more on, it was a focus on academics, but it was much more focused on social responsibility, which was very important to me. So I selected Oberlin College. That was a perfect fit for me. It was open, it was flexible. They had a long history of what was important for me was supporting African American women in the academic experience. And they had a strong history of social responsibility and respect for human beings and respect for diversity and difference. And so those things were important to me. And so I selected the college that was going to be the best fit for my personality. And I would encourage everyone to do that because when you're in that environment that's the best fit for you, you perform your best academically.
Absolutely. I believe, as you said, at this day and age, a lot of people see academics as more of a competition with each other and with oneself. You briefly touched upon this topic earlier, actually, but people say that to become a doctor, you have to have straight A's in high school while taking on a rigorous course load. How would you address this stigma directly? I mean, for example, when my B plus in the first semester of geometry my freshman year prevent me from becoming a doctor?
No. Okay. And and certainly I don't want to downplay the importance of grades. Okay. Grades are. I think it's important for folks to understand that grades are basically just they're your rite of passage, right? They're entry criteria. And when so in medical school. I can tell you, as a member of the medical school admissions committee, I've never seen anyone talk about anyone's high school grades. And so essentially, people focus on high school grades in part because they're concerned about getting into college. I think what is important about high school when you think about academics is, good grades typically reflect your ability to be disciplined, to plan your time, to plan your schedule. And those are important skills. And then being willing to sacrifice fun activities sometimes to prepare for a test. Those are important skills. Those are lifelong learning skills. And so practicing those skills in high school and pushing yourself to do the best you can is really important. But, your high school grades, probably more reflect, on the process of college admissions than they will on medical school admissions. I think most of it has to do with how really the important thing of high school is how you're developing yourself as a learner and as a human being, because even colleges aren't just looking at your grades. They're looking at other things that demonstrate that you are a person who have other interests, other abilities, other skills, ways of finding fulfillingness and happiness and managing your stress. Like all of those things are equally important. So, no, you don't have to have straight A's in high school to get into medical school. It may be that, you may have decided you're going to go to a college where it's uber competitive. And even then, even super competitive colleges are looking for folks who do other things. What's your contribution to society? What will be your contribution to your college community? So if the only thing they have on which to evaluate you is your grades and your test scores, that's going to make it hard to get into even a super competitive college. So you should be doing what you enjoy. And I think that will be reflected in your grades and in your essays and in your interviews if you interview. But I think all of those things matter.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of teenagers these days, they place all of their focus on getting these grades rather than figuring out what they're actually interested in and what they want to do with their life. That being said, you said in high school that you weren't exactly sure what you wanted to do. So what was the main thing that really drove you and pushed you towards medicine?
Well, I think when I was in college, I developed much more of an interest in medicine. So when I was in high school, I went to a Catholic all girls high school, and interestingly, at that time there was this idea that women should not necessarily pursue medicine. That there were other things I could pursue, and so there really was not a strong push for women in my high school to do those things. So that was was a little bit unusual for them. When I went to college, though, I had, of course, what college provides you is a breadth of experiences so that there are lots of different things you can try and lots of different things that you're exposed to. And while I was in college, I developed an interest in much more of an interest in science. And some interest in research. So I had an interest in medicine, but I really still wasn't convinced that I didn't want to pursue a PhD. And I had a very strong interest in plant science. And I thought that maybe what I wanted to do was agriculture. And so I took all of my prerequisites for medical school because it was part of my major anyway. I majored in biology. But I really thought that I'd probably do research. And so after college, I actually spent 2 years doing research. I worked in a laboratory for a couple of years while I was figuring out, what I wanted to do. And as I did more research and I did really more basic science research in those 2 years, I realized that my interest was much more linked with science that involved people, and that I enjoyed the people interaction component of, the scientific piece. How did that translate into work with human beings? how did that translate into supporting clinical care? And so one of the things I had done during college that sort of informed some of my thinking was I had shadowed a couple of physicians who were alumni of my college, and I got a sense of what physicians did on a day-to-day basis. And so that I still liked that component, but I really sort of liked the inquiry component of research. And so I did research for a while, and then I still had this sense that I wanted to be a plant scientist. But then when I started thinking about agriculture, it was hard for me to see myself farming and doing all the things I'd have to do. And so I think at that juncture, I sort of made some decisions about what I wanted to pursue. And if I did science, it was going to be more clinical science. And in order to do that, I would have to go to medical school. So I decided to apply to medical school at that point.
As you said, college gives you the opportunity to really pursue different interests and see what you really want to do. After deciding that you actually wanted to pursue medicine, did you have any memorable moments during which you felt you achieved milestones in your journey with medicine?
I think so. So, when I made the decision to go to medical school, I I'm not sure why I thought that I was really interested in finishing as quickly as I could. I think it was because I had taken the 2 years off. I felt like I was like older than my classmates. Now I realize now how foolish that was, but at the time that's what I thought. So I was like, I want to get this done quickly. So I decided to go to a program that was a 3-year program, so that the first 2 years were combined into 1 year. And then the remainder of the time was a clinical program. It was called an independent studies program at Ohio State. And so I decided to do the independent studies program. And I'll tell you, it was really an eye-opening experience for me because, medical school really does challenge you to really reform your study habits. So, for example, I remember thinking when I was applying to medical school, the MCAT was the biggest challenge. And, it actually wasn't. The MCAT is an exam, and it's like every other exam. You prepare for it and you do the best you can. And so much of how you do on exams is related to your state of mind when you approach that exam, because most of the time, if you've studied, the knowledge is in your head somewhere. You just have to relax enough to pull it out. And so the MCAT is just another rite of passage. It's like taking your PSATs, your SATs, your ACTs, or all the exams one takes in their lifetimes. And so, the MCAT though really became a minor thing once I got past that, right? Because while applying to medical school is the biggest thing, it's the looming thing in your head, right? As if, medical schools only look at two things, your MCATs and your grades. Well, they look at MCATs and grades, but that's not all we look at. And so I am on I interview students. I'm on the admissions committee at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. And, I meet students all the time. And what is so impressive about the students who pursue medicine, so often is that they're fairly well-rounded. They've done interesting things. They're fairly humanistic. They really care about taking care of other people. They really see it as mission-driven. Okay, it's part of their mission to make sure people are healthy, and they're committed to something bigger than themselves. And their applications reflect that. So it's not just that they got great grades and they got good MCAT scores, but they're fairly well-rounded, humanistic individuals. And so, I find that actually pretty impressive because you realize, once you get to medical school, that the important things are, your ability to master information that you will use in the care of your patients. So for me, the milestones for me in medical school was probably my first year, just coming to understand sort of the rigor of the study of medical school, so that it forced me to have to use all my best skills, and my bad habits, like waiting till the last minute to do things, just didn't work anymore because they were too anxiety provoking. But once I got through the first year, I knew that, getting through everything else was going to be relatively easy. Um, during the independent studies program, everything was kind of crammed into a relatively short period of time. So, once I got through the national board exams, which is what they were offering at the time, now it's the USMLEs. Similar things. They test your basic science knowledge in the first couple of years, and then the rest of it is more clinical science. It's 3 parts. The national board used to be 3 parts. Yeah, there were 3 parts. I was trying to remember back then. But basically, I think that getting through the basic science component of medical school was kind of a milestone. And you really started to make the transition during the last part of your basic educational skills, which was mostly didactic at the time, to make that transition to your clinical service. And I think that's when it really feels like you're in medical school, when you are able to start your clinical rotations and start to work with patients and around with your attendings. And then that's when you start to recognize what you really like in medicine and start to think about what your career choices will be like.
I mean, clearly being an associate professor of psychiatry at the Perelman School of Medicine and being on the admissions committee and having gone through this entire process, clearly you have a very exceptional understanding of medical students' course load and lifestyle. That being said, do you have any advice for medical students juggling difficult academics while also trying to maintain healthy physical, social, and mental lifestyles?
Yes, I do. And so what I want to say is the good news is since the old days when I went to medical school, some things have changed. And one of them is that there's an emphasis by the medical schools on supporting well-being. Okay. And that's really important because what I don't think I realized when I was in medical school is that that balance is so important to your performance. So I would have performed just as well if I had exercised more and maybe did mindfulness more, or I wish I'd done yoga back then. But there are things that bring life balance that's essential to maintaining your equilibrium when you're going through medical school. And there are definitely aspects of medical school that are stressful, right? So, even if the academics aren't too challenging, and many of the medical schools nowadays are really moving to a pass-fail system, team-based learning. Like they're really using innovations in education to support learning, which, by the way, works better and people learn just as well. And they come out just as skilled as they would be if they had done the traditional didactic, take a test every month. So a lot of that's changing, but there's definitely an emphasis on maintaining your mental health, managing your stress, taking care of your physical health, building in breaks, using mindfulness and stress reduction techniques. It is really, really important. And so interestingly, I've started to think more about the potential medical students that I interview, and there's some common themes I find among the students. And, one of the questions I ask them is really about how they maintain their equilibrium and balance their stress. And interestingly, almost all of them have ways that they do that. And so some of them, many they regularly exercise, they monitor their sleep, so they make sure as much as possible they get a good night's sleep. They actually engage in some fairly frequent stress reduction activities. Like I've been very surprised at the number of them who actually journal on a regular basis. And the ones who don't do it on a regular basis are working to do it on a regular basis. They spend time with their friends, they're connected with their families. And so all of those things are important. And they're especially important as you're progressing through medical school because there will be times, no matter what, that are really, really hard. So when you're in your clinical rotations, there'll be patients you become attached to who are sick. There'll be patients who will die. There will be times that you are challenged and you don't know the answers to things. There are times that you feel intimidated, overwhelmed by situations, even though you'll get through them. But all of those things are part of the experience of becoming a physician. And they happen to everybody. And what's going to be important is not that they happen to you, but how you manage them and how you move beyond them and how you learn to integrate the lessons and the message without taking the negative experience with you. And all of those things are really important.
Absolutely. It's great to see an increased importance on maintaining one's health, especially in regards to school and all of the stress that we're faced with these days.
And that
But
starts in high school, Ashley. So people should start,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I can attest to that. But as you said, getting to certain levels getting to certain levels of success in the medical field and really any field of work, it comes at the cost of many challenging decisions and most likely difficult experiences. So over the course of your medical career, I'm sure you've had to make many of these tough decisions along the way. Can you please share some of those experiences and how you coped with them?
Yeah. So I think when I think about the toughest decisions I've had to make have really they've had to do primarily with my time and how I spend my time and how I allocate my time. And I think, trying to balance family commitments with medical school can be really challenging. And it's important to learn how to do it early because it's a lifelong challenge. So once you go into medicine, there will always be times that you have to make decisions about your time and try to structure your time in ways where you have some balance with your family life and work life. And so I think the hardest decisions I've had to make are times that was so focused on work that I had to accomplish that I did not spend as much time with my family as I would have liked. But I think those are the hard ones. So, there are times you're on call for the holidays. You don't necessarily, you like to be able to spend time with your family and your friends. There are definitely times that I've had to choose to study or commit to some other activity that took time away from other things I wanted to do. So, deciding to give a talk to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is really important, but that time comes from other time that I might be spending with my family is time that I'm preparing for those presentations. And then having to travel to do those things takes time away from family too. And I think for me, those have been the hardest decisions. And I don't think there's any right or wrong way to make them because sometimes it's been a matter of, that 1 hour, that the couple of hours you're not at home, you're able to make a difference in the lives of other people. But I continue to find those to be the most difficult decisions that I have to make.
Yeah, I'm sure that maintaining this work-life balance is very difficult, and being forced to choose between the two, I honestly could not imagine that. But speaking of these difficult decisions, although maybe not to the same caliber as you just described, I'm sure choosing one's specialty is an important moment in a doctor's career. How did you choose your specialty? Did you consider any other choice besides psychiatry?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I actually, when I started medical school, there were two things I was certain about, that I did not want to do psychiatry and I did not want to work with children. So those were things I was certain about. And I was pretty sure that I wanted to do OBGYN. That was my plan. But as I went through my medical school experience and my clinical rotations, that's when you really start to get a sense of what you like and what appeals to you. And during my very first rotation, I had an experience, and my first rotation was psychiatry. And I was like, how could this happen to me? Why am I not in internal medicine on my first rotation? But it turns out that was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me because I was introduced to child psychiatry. And the woman who eventually became my mentor and who recruited me to the University of Pennsylvania happened to be my first attending in child psychiatry. And so, Dr. Elizabeth Weller ran a program for children who were bereaved, had lost their parents. And she was doing a large research project at the time on that population and learning to talk to children, learning to understand their experiences and how their experiences impact their development as human beings and as adults was really fascinating. And from that moment on, I was sure I wanted to work with children. I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to do just child psychiatry because I also liked pediatrics and I really liked hematology oncology population. And so towards the end of my medical school, I talked with Dr. Waller, who was my mentor, and said, I really like pediatrics and I really like child psychiatry. Be great to do them both. And she said, you can. And so I did. And so I ended up doing a pilot program that was a 5-year combined program in pediatrics and child psychiatry called the Triple Board program at the time. And so I trained in both. And then I practiced pediatrics and child psychiatry both for a while until I decided that there are way more pediatricians than there are child psychiatrists. And now I focus my practice principally on child psychiatry. So your choices in medicine change many times. I think many people who start medical school believe they have a pretty good idea of what they want to do, just like I did. And you have so many experiences that really open your mind to different ways of thinking about things. So I'm really happy that I made that choice. The best choice for me. OBGYN would not have been. This was a much better fit.
Great. Well, as you've expressed, it's clear that passions and the experiences that build up these passions play a great and important role in the decision making throughout your career and really in any career in general. To be more specific about certain paths for physicians further along the road, it's my understanding that there are two general main paths that a physician can choose to follow. Especially in hospitals affiliated with universities, there is the academic clinician and clinical educator. For viewers, this basically means that a doctor can choose between focusing more on research or clinical work. There are obviously more available paths and different circumstances and situations that they can go through, but I'm just trying to highlight the main two. But obviously, the actual doctor here could do a much better job on elaborating on this. So, Dr. Benton, could you please explain the difference between the two? And I'm sure, as I said, the passions play a great role in making this decision, but how did you ultimately make this choice?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Ashley. So interestingly, academic institutions play a big role in the lives of physicians because they train all of the physicians. So they play an outsized role compared to the number of patients they actually take care of. So despite the fact that everybody goes through an academic center for their training, most patients are taken care of outside of academic centers. So most patient care actually happens in other places. So for those people, though, so many people choose after their residencies and their fellowships or after medical school that they're going to practice in the community, which is where most physicians see patients in the community setting or in community hospitals or community practices. In academics, academics shapes all of medicine because they train all of the physicians. And, whether one chooses to stay in academic medicine or not really has to do with how you see your mission for yourself when you enter medical school. So some people know they're interested in public health and they want to work in underserved communities and they want to be that community doctor that or takes care of people in a small town. Like they know that about themselves, that's important. And then many other factors influence those decisions. So for many people decide to be in a small town is where they grew up. It's what inspired them to do medicine in the first place. For those who stay in academics, most of the time it's really shaped by your professors and your mentors, and people who influence your career path. So staying in academic medicine, which I chose to do, has many benefits. I mean, one of the things that I like about academic medicine in general is I work with a team. And I like the continuous learning and the team membership. And then I like innovation. And so in academic centers, that's typically where that happens. Whether one chooses a clinical path or research path or both, which is typically what happens. So probably about 75% of physicians who do research do clinical research. So they're doing patient-focused research. Maybe another 25% decide they're going to do bench research, which takes them away from patients. But it's a much smaller population of individuals. I actually did not think that I was going to be a researcher once I finished my fellowship. I was much more interested in patient care. But what starts to happen when you work in an academic environment for a while is that many times you reach a limit on what you can actually do for your patients. And so the research is generally motivated by a problem that you identify in your patient population that you'd like to solve. And so I think that for most people, their research is motivated by something of interest they'd like to fix. So one of my colleagues just found a cure for cancer, for T-cell cancers in children. Motivated by, a commitment that he had to treating cancer patients and finding cures for common causes of death for children. And so his research, I mean, he's a high profile researcher. He's a clinical researcher. He also takes care of patients, but his major focus is on the research. So I think many times, the decision to pursue research really comes about from an interest in a certain patient population that you care for, that you want to be able to find cures or better treatments. Now, there are many people who know from the very beginning they want to do research because they find it, they love the inquiry, they love that kind of work, and they make those decisions early. But for most physicians, it really grows out of an interest in a particular topic area where, there may not be cures or there may not be optimal management. It could be something in your own family background, because most of our choices are based on our life experiences, whether we recognize it or not. And so I think that, I think the decision about research comes from that. And then his lifestyle. So for those who pursue research for most of their time, or who pursue research all of their time, they're, they're not necessarily taking care of patients. They're not necessarily providing clinical care. They're not necessarily taking call. Maybe they have young children. Like, I think lots of things, kind of factor into those decisions. And then people change things at different points in their career. So sometimes people move from a clinical to an academic, academic position, because there's a lot of flexibility in medicine. So there are lots of different things you can do.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd actually like to shift our focus just a little bit. Being in this field for many years now, I'm sure you've developed many healthy habits in regards to your lifestyle and at home and at work. So I'd like to know, what do you do to motivate yourself? And in other words, what are your winning formulas or even secret sauces and healthy habits that you follow daily to be the best version of yourself?
Well, so I wish I had my habits were all healthy. So, but I will say, I do try to make it a point to, one, I feel better, my energy level's higher if I exercise on a regular basis. I try to make time to, spend time with my family as much as I can. I now have started using my Calm app. So the mindfulness pieces and things like journaling are actually really helpful. And that's actually been extra helpful during COVID, when stress levels are high. And not only that, you seem to be able to squeeze more meetings in by Zoom than you could in real life. And so, so I find, like, the mindfulness, taking breaks, making sure I spend time with my family and friends. I build in that time so that I do that every week. And I read. I find books that I like to read, and I do that pretty consistently. But I make sure I do those things because I enjoy those things. And, I set up time for myself to, listen to some good podcasts while I exercise. And I tie those things together because they'll make sure I meet my exercise goals. And I try to remind myself that, every day we have many things to be thankful for, and not to focus too much on the bad things that happen, but focus on solutions and moving forward. And those things are really helpful. But I definitely try to make time, every day as much as possible, even if it's only 10 minutes, for self-reflection and thinking about what I want to do for that day. And making sure I have a schedule that eventually my day will end, and I'm not going to work late into the night every evening. But I'm just mindful of things I need to do to minimize my stress.
As you said, maintaining this healthy work-life balance and having a good lifestyle is extremely important. On the other hand, I know your work, while also time-consuming, can be very interesting. I mean, as the director of psychiatry at one of the leading children's hospitals in America, I'm sure your schedule is filled with committee meetings, research projects, clinical work. You probably have plans for the future. So do you have any new research projects or publications planned that you could share with us?
So that's a really good question. I don't, well, we do have planned publications coming up, and, quite a few. So, as you may be aware, a lot of my research is currently focused on suicide prevention. And so we're actually starting to look at special populations that recently we've identified increasing trends of suicidal behavior. And those populations tend to be minoritized youth and girls. And so we're actually starting to look at some of our data to see if we can identify risk factors and predictors for suicidal behavior in those populations of adolescents. So we're actually analyzing some of that data right now. We're looking at how traumatic events, poverty, neighborhood violence contribute to feelings of suicidality and hopelessness. And so we're studying those things with the goal of identifying those at risk so we can do prevention. And so that's some of the work that we're focusing on right now. And we have a few big grants that are pending for that kind of work. And we're actually starting to publish some data that we've collected over time focused on those kind of questions. What is it that places some teenagers at risk for thinking about suicide? And what kind of things can we identify early to prevent young people from having those kind of experiences?
Obviously, with all the academic, clinic, and research work you do with teenagers and child adolescent psychiatry, you most likely have a greater understanding of teen psychology and the medical field really in general. With regards to this, do you have any advice for teenagers who want to go into medicine specifically?
Yeah, I do. So one, it's a great profession. And, and there are many great professions in the medical field. I think nursing is another great profession. I mean, there's so many different opportunities, but if it's something you want to do, you should pursue it. It's doable. It's not, if you listen to all the discussions, you would think it's not possible. Like, how will I ever do this? Um, Thousands of people do it every day. And you can too. You just have to decide it's what you want to do. And you have to know it's a long road. Now, it doesn't feel that long when you're in it. It goes by faster than you think, but it's doable. It's worthwhile. It doesn't take all the joy out of your life. It actually enhances your life, but you have to walk into medicine with the right attitude. And that is that, you have the fire in your belly for being able to take care of patients, and you want to be able to do that. And then if you decide that's what you want to do, talk to people who are doing it, find out what the process is, and start making the plans for how that's going to work for you. And then when things happen that don't go well, I do think one strength of people who are successful in medicine is that setbacks and failures can't throw you off your game. I mean, you have to recognize that setbacks and failures happen, and you can learn. They don't feel great, right? We prefer not to have them, but when they happen, there's always something to learn from it, and take the lesson and keep moving forward. And that's a really, really important skill. And if it's what you want to do, don't give up. Okay. Take advantage of every opportunity that you can find to learn more about what you want to do. Ask questions, speak up, try to maintain your confidence, and it will. I think you'll do fine. And so I would encourage any of you who are really interested in pursuing medicine to do that, and asking the kind of questions you're asking right now are the kinds of questions people should be asking, and the kind of discussions you should be having.
That's extremely inspiring. I know that a lot of people are hindered by the stigmas behind medicine and all of these difficulties that teenagers face with today. Because I'm sure you understand that our generation is faced with multitudes of new technologies and different situations that bear even greater difficulties for children, adolescents, teenagers, and so on. So, considering everything that we are exposed to and everything that's going on with our current world, do you have advice for teenagers to lead a healthy lifestyle and be successful in their pursuits, any pursuits really? And ultimately, how do we chase our dreams?
So one, have dreams and believe in them. Okay, and don't let anybody tell you you can't do what you want to do. Sometimes people try to deter you from your dreams, but they're yours. And the things that you believe in and things that are important to you, you should pursue them. But make sure that I always suggest that people write down their goals, okay? Because they're much more likely to happen. If you have a dream or vision and you write about it, it's much more likely to happen than if you don't. Because your dream and your vision, if you write about it every day, becomes a plan and a roadmap. And I think that's really, really important. And then dream big. Like, don't let anyone tell you you can't accomplish what you want to accomplish. Make sure you keep friends and make sure you communicate with others and surround yourself with people who are positive and who believe in you. And don't surround yourself with people who second guess you and bring you down. That's actually never helpful. And sometimes even with your friends who are going through something temporarily where they behave that way, find someone else to hang out with until they become a person who can be supportive. But I think that it's really important to surround yourself with positive experiences, supportive people, and stay focused on what you want to accomplish. I think that one of the things that we do know about medicine is that doctors of the future will need to be much more technologically savvy because it's so much a part of the work that we do now. Another important aspect of the future of medicine is that doctors have to be more globally focused, right? It's a global world. It's not just the US anymore. And so all of those things will shape the doctor of the future, which is different than the doctor of today. But I think, your generation also has a lot of opportunities. We've learned a lot. Um, our technologies have advanced, our scientific technologies have advanced, and medicine is moving forward. And I think that your generation has an opportunity to advance the medical field further, more rapidly, utilizing the technologies that are available now. And they're technologies that most of us in my generation won't know how to use, in the next 10 to 15 years. And so that would be my advice to a young person now. It's your world, it's your life, and you should do everything that you want to do that you possibly can do.
That's fantastic advice. I truly hope that all of our viewers, no matter what they plan to do with their future, take that to heart and really remember that in anything that you do. Now, Dr. Benton, that's actually all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for talking with me and being part of the eCoreAcademy community. This was truly inspiring, and I could not be any more thankful.
Well, thank you for having me, and good luck to you and all of your viewers. I look forward to hearing your stories.
Thank you. Have a great day, Dr. Benton.
You too. Bye.
Overall, I hope you all enjoyed that video and found it insightful. Dr. Benton is a very accomplished individual, as you can see. Not only is she a prominent figure in the medical field, she is also a very inspirational woman. For more information on Dr. Benton, please check the description box below. Her social medias will be included. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and hit the post notification bell to get notified when we do release that content. Also, don't be afraid to drop a comment down below about your thoughts regarding this video. And please, it would be very appreciated if you shared using our socials, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Have a great day, guys. Bye.